Welcome to a special program on co-housing. My name is Bill Weir, and I'm delighted to have two guests who are active in the Twin Cities Co-housing Network. Kathy Ahlers organizes the co-housing meetup for Minneapolis-St. Paul. She has studied 9 different co-housing communities in America and Europe, and she is interested in living in an intergenerational co-housing community. Welcome, Kathy.
Thank you, Bill.
Dale Joel is a board member of SAGE Co-housing International, which is promoting co-housing. He presently lives in St. George, Utah, where he plans to develop a co-housing project and live there. Welcome.
Hi, Bill.
Dale. Dale, what is co-housing?
Co-housing is a concept that was started in Denmark in the 70s and brought over here by Charles Durrett. It's unique because it grows out of the people coming together, and the relationships that form are reflected back in the community. So that reflection often takes architectural forms, and some of the things, key ingredients are eating together on a regular basis, having your own space to live in, but common spaces to interact. The other key thing, Bill, is we got to get the cars away from the deal and stop worshiping the streets and garages in our community.
Yeah.
And the way they do that is by having the cars park remotely, and then you've got to get through the common space to get to your house, and so that facilitates the interaction of the people.
Sounds very interesting. Is it like a commune then?
Some very specific differences to the commune, co-housing to a commune. A commune is quite often financially tied to each other. A co-housing, people are economically independent. They have their own private space, and it often is much like a condominium in terms of ownership. So you get the best of community without being dependent on each other economically.
That sounds a lot healthier.
I think the other major element for co-housing is that the group of people who are going to be living there forms first. And they have potlucks, they get to know each other, they have maybe facilitators come in to help them describe what they're looking for in terms of values and in terms of the physical plant, like the community that they're going to build or refurbish. So that's, I think, a key difference from some other kinds of things.
Yeah, and it seems to me, Dale, you have an event, Kathy and Dale, you have an event coming up on September 15?
We do.
2016.
Yep, in September 15th, Charles Durrett, who brought co-housing over here from Denmark and is from Grass Valley, California, and is the guy, really the father of co-housing in the U.S., and has written the books, is coming here to the Twin Cities for a kickoff of to create some co-housing here in the Twin Cities.
And I think we should also mention the mother of co-housing is his wife, also an architect, Katie McCammont. So that team are the ones, but Chuck will be here to speak.
Right.
And to help bring a focus to all of our several groups that are starting to develop co-housing groups.
I see his name on several of the books here. Finding a site for co-housing and growing community and happily ever aftering in co-housing. So that's an important thing. Finding people that are compatible with one another, I'm sure.
That is a key to the success of a co-housing community, and people of all ages find it a very beneficial structure because of the interdependence that forms among the people naturally, partly because of the design of the complex. So the mailboxes are all in the common house. There's a communal dining place so that if they want to have group meals, which many of the different organizations do, they can have them in this space and be together, and it's a very beautiful and fun place to be.
Great.
So one of the key things in co-housing, what makes co-housing successful? And it's a group process that happens. When you get groups together, some groups operate respectful for each other, some groups ignore some people or some things and have some things that are not healthy in the group. And one of the key things, when Chuck went back and studied existing co-housing, by the way, there's 150 co-housing groups already established in the U.S. and 80 in the process.
Already in the U.S.
80 in the process of forming.
Wow.
So when he went back and studied what makes, there are some co-housing places where there's a big list of people who want to get in. And then there's some co-housing places that don't have, that there's some vacancies and are not as successful. And one of the things that he found was, and it's a reflection of the group process, is that the people who are successful are the ones that eat together on a regular basis, at least 3 or 4 times a week. And what that does is it sets up a process for people to understand each other, to resolve conflicts and work out their differences so that they don't have to have a mile long of rules and regulations, because if people don't talk to each other, then you got to go to the book and enforce something. And none of us never like to have the rules used against us.
Right.
I guess this is pointing up another key element in that most co-housing communities are self-managed. So the people themselves are the ones who decide how frequently the lawn will be mown, or if there's a lawn at all, whether they spray the lawn or leave it in its natural state, and all of those kinds of decisions, as well as the interactional and leadership within the group.
I can see that not everyone would want to be part of a co-housing community, but for those that would like to explore this, they should come Thursday, September
15th.
15th.
And where?
It'll be at First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, which
Oh,
is 900
900
Mount Curve.
900 Mount Curve, yeah.
And we will meet in the evening from 7 to 9. Chuck will speak, and then we will have time for people to ask questions and have some information about several of the groups that are starting to form around a particular concept for a co-housing community.
Now, there is at least one co-housing community already here, isn't there?
Yes, there is. It's called Monterey Co-housing, and it's in St. Louis Park. It's been around for, I'm guessing, 20 years. I'm not sure exactly, but something on that order. And they are kind of at a point of some of the people who had lived there have moved out to, because of maybe accessibility issues, or I don't know what, but there are a few vacancies there right now, and so they'll be there to give information about their community and how people can maybe get into a place sooner than one of these others that will have to be built or renovated.
Yeah, I remember one of my friends, an artist, lived there at Monterey Community, and she got married and moved out and
Yes.
sold her unit. So
Sometimes, yes, life changes will change someone's desire to live there, and they'll move.
But is it easy enough to sell that? Is it kind of like a condo, or?
Well, I think it's a work in process. All of the communities out there have a strategy, one or the other, of a list or just trying to get the word out. And I think it's important for anybody who's considering co-housing, and the communities would insist on this, that they have a chance to get to know the community before making that purchase decision so that they feel comfortable, and vice versa.
There are many kinds of co-housing too, Bill.
What kinds?
Well, you know, in Salt Lake City right now, there's an artist co-housing group forming. There's an LGBT group forming in Utah. And then there's the traditional senior and intergenerational, and those all can, you know, we separate them out in our minds, and they can be intermixed or set up as being totally separate. As an example, many intergenerational with families and singles have a large number of seniors as part of their community. There are some senior...
Sort of having a grandma and grandpa built in.
That's right. Babysitting is no problem. And you know, sometimes the seniors, there are some senior co-housing that set up that want only to be seniors. But you know, demographically right now, Bill, the senior co-housing is coming into. They're the goat in the snake with the baby boomers coming through the housing market. And
you mean like a python that swallowed something large and that's moving through?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not fond of that.
That
metaphor.
analogy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Being one of the baby boomers yourself, are you?
Well, no.
No, you aren't. I am.
I'm older than that.
Oh, you are. Okay.
Yeah. So there are different kinds of co-housing. You want to say anything about?
I had something that I thought I would toss out there, and that is that many of the co-housing communities out there, and Monterey isn't necessarily one of those, the one that's here now, but some of them, it's kind of a high price point to get in. These are ownership models generally. There might occasionally be a rental available, but mostly it's an ownership of this condo unit or townhome. And so one of the challenges is to do this affordably so that the young families and singles would have a chance to participate. So in the group, in Twin Cities Co-Housing Network, we are looking at that from a very broad perspective, trying to get creative about funding sources. Maybe there could be different units in a complex, so maybe there'd be senior co-housing, and on that place they could get those 55 plus tax advantages, tax credits, and then have intergenerational and maybe a rental that would also serve as Airbnb or a hostel. I mean, you could have a lot of different combinations. Some co-housing communities have a mixed-use building. So the ground floor is retail space that they can rent out, and that can be a good give and take with the people who live there. If there's a coffee shop and they want a coffee shop, well, they've got a built-in audience for that business, and then they get rent from the business to help support the community.
One thing that I think we should profile is there's a lot of community space, and there's quite often a community house, quite often with a gourmet kitchen and maybe a television viewing area. If it's a intergenerational, they might have a teen area for teens to congregate. There might be a pool room or a swimming pool or something
or a hot tub.
Or a hot tub, there you go. And if those are done correctly with the right amount of light and the right design, you know, people are drawn into that community space.
Yeah.
And that facilitates, once again, the relationships on an ongoing basis.
Good. So it sounds like it's really flexible for what the people want to create.
It's a reflection of the people who get together, and they're only limited by their creativity and their boundaries for their dreams, and of course money.
I did have one thing that I would like to say about the difference between co-housing and some other structures. Right now in Minneapolis, there is a pending ordinance change that is, I believe they call it the Cooperative Housing Ordinance, and it's an intentional communities related issue. And that would be just sharing, for example, a house, so that each bedroom has a deadbolt on it, and that's their space, but they share the kitchen and the bathroom. And that's not generally how we talk about co-housing. Co-housing is a full apartment, even if it's a small one, complete with kitchen and bathroom and everything else that a person or a family would need. So I wanted to make that distinction because that's a current issue right now.
Good.
You know, introvert, extrovert, that's always an interesting conversation because people are thinking, quite often think that, well, in co-housing, boy, you got to be an extrovert to deal with all this community and these common spaces. But you know, part of that is taken into consideration with design, where each unit, you try to have a private space so that when you have your friends over and you have a private little party, or you want to read your book or do whatever, that you can be all by yourself. And then quite often there's a public space that you can be together with your friends and see the people walking down the sidewalk and interact with them. And you know, there's even a number of feet away from that public space to the sidewalk where you want to still be able to look your neighbor in the eye and read their emotional state that day. Another way to stay connected.
Right. So the process, I find a book, Growing Community, How to Find New Co-Housing Members. But that's after they've gotten underway, isn't it? Or is that before they?
That would be before.
Before, okay.
Well, it may be also during, but it's really crucial to have a feeling of community before you go forward with plunking down some money for earnest money before that shovel hits the ground.
And then finding a site, co-housing from the ground up, also by Chuck Durrett and co-authors.
So growing community, you know, that's really what we're trying to do by having Chuck Durrett come here. That's part of, we're trying to get all these people who really have not considered this as a housing option before to come and start to envision themselves as maybe this is something that I could be doing, and turning, you know, away from the car and the streets and the busy sort of preoccupation that our life has gotten in, and a turn back to a community where people are nurtured. One of the nice things about thinking about senior co-housing, and this is how I ended up in the co-housing, getting into co-housing, was, you know, going through the death and dying of my parents. And seeing where they went and what they went through and the cost and the isolation. If there's one motivation that I think drives people to co-housing, is not wanting to be isolated.
Yeah.
None of us want to be isolated.
Right, and
Well,
that's
it's
not-
unhealthy to be isolated.
And that's not age
Not
determined.
age-related.
Yeah.
I mean, you can be
if
just
everybody's
as,
looking at their phone, that's isolating too.
Absolutely.
But the empty nesters, families where their kids have grown up and are all,
you can be isolated with with two people working full time, and your kids running every night to doing something, and you've got to cook meals 7 nights a week. That can be an isolating experience.
Yes.
Well, and of course, the one that's really stands out in my mind is when you have a mate or a loved one, you know, one of you is going to go before the other one.
probably.
Probably, you know. And when that happens, that is a very difficult time for the other one. But you know, there's something even worse than having one die, and you know, that is someone becoming disabled, and a long-term disability. You know, statistically, everyone is put into long-term care for 2 years before they die. That means some people are in there for 10 years, and some people don't go in at all.
The average is 2 years.
2 years in a long-term care facility. So, but you know, that's the motivation. That's another motivation to think about senior co-housing, because we can.
You may be able to stay there a lot longer.
You can stay there till you die.
Yeah.
You know, and some of us have long-term care insurance. We can utilize that efficiently. The cost of long-term care is 30% less in a senior co-housing facility, and I would say the quality of the care is much higher than you can get in the best facilities. And why? The reason is because we've got the money and the wherewithal, because of the lower cost, to provide higher quality care. We build little apartments for people, the caregivers, to come and live with us. So we have relationships with our caregivers. They get to know us and can deliver care much more efficiently and effectively. But the other interesting thing is, you don't need as much care in a facility like that, because you've got, you know,
your neighbors will push your wheelchair.
and they'll wipe your nose.
Yeah.
But you know, I think there's a fair amount of time that goes into drawing the lines and saying what they will do and what they won't do. And I think that's very healthy conversation.
They're more than neighbors. They're part of the same community.
And you know, part of what, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to mention that the benefits don't just accrue to the elders in an intergenerational co-housing community. The benefits really are there for everyone. For example, the new economy, with many people self-employed or in very small companies that may have no site, there could be co-working, officing space built into the common house, for example, so that not only was there a place to just conduct the regular activities of life, but there also is this potential for impromptu business partnerships to form among the people who are there. I think a challenge for co-housing is to embrace a wide diversity of people who might be interested if they only knew about it and what it was all about, and aren't intimidated by the word co-housing, because a lot of people aren't really sure what it means. So I'm glad that we're having this chance. Thank you, Bill, for having, for, you know,
we probably
talking
need more
about
than
it.
half an hour to do this, but we'll have to settle for a half hour today. I would like to direct people to the Wikipedia article on co-housing. That has a lot in it. Charles Durrett is also written up in Wikipedia.
For those who want to buy some books, Creating Co-Housing and Senior Co-Housing, written by Charles Durrett, is available on Amazon or some local
Anywhere.
bookstores.
Yeah. So, well, is there something special about the Twin Cities that makes this a desirable place?
Well, it's such a high quality of life that's possible here because of relatively low rents and mortgages compared with the incomes, but that's not across the board. So I think that there are still challenges with it, and I guess we'll see. We're taking it one step at a time.
Well, I think there are a lot more than just that. I think part of the spirit of this metropolis involves trying to recognize problems and solve them before they get out of hand.
And you know,
that's very important in co-housing.
we're very community-minded here in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Even though I live in St. George, Utah now, I grew up here, and the communities are very tight-knit and they're very community-oriented. You know, and I grew up in South Minneapolis, where there's the alley culture, where everybody walks down the alley and interacts together, and everybody's backyard is kind of 40-foot lots. So when you're out in the backyard, you can see for 2 or 3 yards on both sides.
Yeah.
And so I think there's an opportunity with that for people who are community-minded here to be aware that there are some new concepts in housing that open up not only opportunities for a better quality of life, but a more economical way to live life.
There
Now-
also can be energy savings, so that's another
Oh,
element.
yes.
The co-housing group can decide to do passive house standards, for example, well beyond what the state code requires, which many developers wouldn't find it, they'd find it risky to offer that. But if you're developing it ahead of time and have it 80% or 100% pre-sold, it makes it a lot easier to do that kind of thing.
Yes.
You know, co-housing really believes in the use it or lose it philosophy, and that's part of why and how people take care of their own and do their own management. You know, you can save money, 25 units with one lawnmower. You can and all
one
these
snowblower.
and one snowblower. That's right.
So, I'm sure there are many characteristics of co-housing to make it successful, but have we touched on all of them already, or are there more?
Well, I think having that, getting back to that group process and finding a way, there is a delicate balance. You know, quite often the decision making is consensus, and that is sometimes slow and painful, and sometimes, Bill, I'm not sure I have a deep enough character to be able to go through it. But I think there are some new kinds of additional things coming out in co-housing now where, well, if it's going too slow and the consensus isn't working, here's a backup plan.
So one of these, one of the people in our group, Lynn England, teaches and trains about what's called sociocracy.
Sociocracy.
And that is a different governance model that allows some natural leadership to take place where the group decides to have that place, and then you don't have to have consensus every time.
Good.
And every once in a while, if there's one stick in the mud who won't agree with the group, you know, form a committee and have that person be the chairman of the committee and say,
To solve it.
you figure it out.
We've got less than 2 minutes left. And, I think you've done a magnificent job already in introducing people to co-housing. But if they want to know more, come on September 15 to 900 Mount Curve Avenue. That's just up the hill from the Walker Arts Center.
7 p.m.
7 p.m. And that's just off Hennepin.
Yes.
At Lindale.
Yeah, where Hennepin and Lindale cross.
It's right at the number 6 bus line, if they're going by transit.
Yes, number 6 bus line. There are probably some others, aren't there, going by?
4 goes not too far from there, too.
Good.
Yeah.
So if everything, there's an opportunity there, Bill, to have groups grow out of that conference and end up in a co-housing, developing more co-housing in the Twin
Good.
Cities.
Thank you, Dale.
You bet.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, Bill.
And thank you for tuning in. I hope you've learned a lot about co-housing, and we'll follow up. This is a wonderful way to expand people's awareness of what can be done. So, and there's my phone number if people want to know more.
That's good.
I'll be glad to pass along their questions to you.
Super. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure to be able to come here, and you can tell that there's a little passion behind it.
Yes.
And we think that there's a lot of opportunity for everybody.
Good.